Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to Korean street food classics as we take a look at the Korean corn dog, which, misleading as it may seem, actually does not contain any corn in it at all. For those unfamiliar, the Korean corn dog, or Gamja Hotdog, is a Korean interpretation of the American Sunday backyard barbecue classic corn dog, wherein the cornmeal batter that we all know and love is replaced instead with a yeasted and risen batter wrapped around a cheese-wrapped sausage and finally coated in panko breadcrumb for its crispy exterior finish. Then to round all of this out, because obviously wrapping a meat stick in cheese is never quite enough, a Gamja hotdog is iconically peppered with potatoes or sometimes diced french fries on its exterior, Gamja meaning potato. For our version today, we'll be playing around with this absolutely intense sounding corn dog with the addition of some jalapeno peppers, as well as a few types of cheese to maximize our cheesiness. More importantly though, as you will come to see in a moment, like any other corn dog, its elongated shape makes for a particularly challenging deep fry, so we will absolutely be taking a look at just all of the ways to not do that. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so kicking things off here first, I'm starting off with my dough since it's going to need a decent amount of proofing time today. This is a single tablespoon of dry active yeast going into my largest mixing bowl, followed by a single cup of lukewarm heavy cream. You can also at this point simply use some milk or even just warm water for this purpose too if you want, but I will say that the heavy cream makes for a softer and fluffier dough though. Rounding this out is a single tablespoon of white sugar, then I'm mixing this all to combine and letting it proof for 10 minutes, during which time we're looking for our yeast to start forming some nice lively bubbles, indicating that it is alive and well, like so. Next up, I'm adding in 2 cups of AP flour, then folding this all to combine first with a spatula, then moving on to my hands and some elbow grease until a cohesive dough ball forms. Finally, we're covering this all in plastic wrap and setting it aside to proof in an oven with the oven light on for 2 hours. Meanwhile, while that's proofing, I'm getting to work on our toppings next. Now, most iconically, in order for a Gamja dog to be Gamja, our corn dogs must contain some form of potatoes in its topping. Today, I'm using some russets for our purposes, but I have also seen some very tasty looking results using frozen french fries that have been chopped into cubes too. For our russets though, we're going to be cooking these things twice today since they have not already been par-fried like a frozen french fry. This leaves a lot of room for under or overcooking, so I'm being particularly careful with how I chop these things up to make sure that we have some nice even sizing. I'm doing this by first slicing my potato in half, then slicing into strips. Then next, we're going to want to address the taper of our potato's edge here, which if we're not careful is going to yield some awkwardly small cubes. So I'm trimming off these edges, giving us these nice evenly sized strips that we can now cube. Rounding out our toppings are going to be some jalapenos. Now, I briefly considered leaving these seeds in for a spicy corn dog, but I think these are also just going to peel off during the deep fry anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and de-seed, then large dice these as well to round out our toppings. Next up, moving on to the dogs of our Gamja corn dogs. Now, you can pretty much use any kind of sausage that you want here. Obviously, some form of hot dog would make the most sense, but for our version today though, I'm going with some chicken andouille sausages, mainly because they had the thinnest casing that I could find. As with any other normal corn dog, we're going to be skewering these down the center, but these are also about to be some pretty massive corn dogs today because, as you can imagine, there are going to be 4 separate layers around our dog. So I'm taking a tip from Stella and Spice here and using some disposable wooden chopsticks to skewer our dogs instead of the standard skewer. These are going to be a little bit more sturdy than a regular old skewer. As you'll notice though, we've got a lot of extra skewer at the tail end here, which is going to be pretty annoying to deep fry. So what you'll want to do for yourselves is clip off this extra bit with some scissors, otherwise it's not going to fit in your fryer, as we'll see in a moment. Anyway, moving on to our cheese, I'm using 2 slices of processed American here for the cheese stretch, but mozzarella, pepper jack, or really anything that you would put in a grilled cheese would also work fine as well. Finally, once these are all wrapped up nicely, I'm setting these aside while we head over to the stove to cook our potatoes next. Over on the stove, I've got a pot of water at a rolling boil here, then I'm adding in my diced potatoes and letting these cook for about 5 minutes. We're really just going for a gentle par cook here since these are going to be deep fried in a moment as well. So after about 5 minutes, I'm pulling these out and looking for these to be fork tender but with a decent amount of resistance to the fork too, sort of like a slightly undercooked home fry. I'm straining these and then running under some cold water to cool these bad boys down. Then I'm seasoning with a pinch of kosher salt and about a 1/4 cup of AP flour. This is going to soak up some of that residual moisture, making it a little bit easier for these things to stick into the dough later on. Once these are nice and coated, I'm setting these aside for a moment while we circle back to our dough, which should be roughly doubled in size at this point. Then now what you'll want to do here is go as easy as you can on the dough here when you wrap your corn dogs. These are going to expand in the fry, and don't forget that there is another 2 more layers coming, so probably this is going to be a little bit too chunky here for my first try. Here's a 4th attempt with about half as much dough, which is going to make for a little bit less doughy of a bite than our first attempt. In any case, moving on to our toppings, here's my potatoes going into the sides of my corn dog first, followed by our jalapenos next for some nice color. Then in a separate tray, we're spreading out about a 1/2 cup of panko breadcrumbs so that we may roll our dogs in a 4th and final coating. We're using a fair amount of pressure here as we roll, because we're really going to want to make sure that that panko doesn't pop off in the fry, which, as anyone that has ever made chicken katsu can tell you, is notorious for coming apart in the fryer if you're not careful. Over on the stove, I've got my fryer heating up at 325F. Then now, as I mentioned earlier, what you'll want to do at this point is first clip off the extra bit of skewer at the end of your corn dogs. If you don't, you're gonna have one hell of a time getting these things to fry evenly, and more likely, the tip of your corn dog is gonna drag up against the bottom of your fryer like so, and disaster. So next up on our second try, we also discovered the importance of monitoring your fryer's temperature properly. Our 325°F temperature is slightly lower than normal today because, once again, there are 4 layers of stuff on this hot dog and it's gonna take a sec for it to cook through properly. This means that if your fryer's too hot, you'll have some burnt corn dogs like so. So trying once again for our 3rd time, slightly lower temperature this time, much shorter skewer, and that's one perfect looking corn dog. So the lesson here is be patient and learn from my mistakes. I'm here to make these so that you don't have to. Anyway, I'm finishing these all off with some grated parm and we're ready to eat. Okay, so as someone that has successfully fried many corn dogs in my lifetime, I really thought that this would be a relatively simple one to do, but I'll be honest that these were deceptively tricky to get right. The multiple layers of stuff on our corn dogs make them particularly tricky to deep fry without either undercooking the interior or overcooking the exterior. Not to mention that the sheer plethora of toppings that we also added just allows for so much room for things to come apart in the fry. If you can manage to avoid just all of the mistakes that I made here though, these were some very tasty and decadent corn dogs that I'll absolutely be making for my next barbecue now that I know what not to do. Our cheese is gooey and melty, as of course is truly the best attribute of American cheese, and our jalapenos are only just slightly cooked from the deep fry, allowing for them to retain a nice bit of heat in their relatively raw state. Then finally, our potatoes have a nice bite to them without being overcooked, which I think really benefited from their initial par cook, so that we weren't relying on the deep fry to fully cook them through all on its own. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series dedicated to classic Korean dishes, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet because there's a lot of these. For the Bay Area locals, the Woo Can Cook Fried Rice Pop-Up is back at 2 Pitchers Brewing in Oakland this weekend, so come by and say hi if you can. More about that at woocancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice interneters, and I'll see you soon.